All right, people, so we're back on Breaking Dawn this morning, and we got Mr. Ramkumar and Narinesingh with us this morning, and we're continuing a discussion from last week. Of course, he's industrial relations and, of course, business management, very solution-driven, finds a lot of solutions, and we had a little conversation last week. We started with late coming. We know that is the Trinidadian way of doing things, is to reach late anywhere you're going. Nobody's ever, well, I'm going to say nobody, because I know a couple of people that within my circle and my family that always on time. They don't make joke with time at all, right? But a lot of people, you know, they like to walk in and stroll into work. We don't really take the job, I guess, serious enough to reach 30 minutes before or hour before and things like that, right? Because nobody likes to spend time at the office. So we got him here this morning and we'll be chatting with him for a bit. Okay. So where did we leave off? And I know last week you said something about grace is for God.
Yeah.
And you want to clarify something with that? Yeah, go ahead, no problem.
So the feedback I got, some people took a little bit of umbrage to that. They felt, that grace is something that employers should extend to their employees in consideration for their circumstances. So I want to put some perspective on this concept of late coming. We have provisions in law for sick leave because people will invariably get sick, right? It's the nature of a human being, right? And we have provisions in place for vacation because it is understood in the structure of our constitution and good industrial relations practices that a person who's working consistently, they do require a break from the monotony of work for the purposes of mentally resetting and that kind of thing, right? When it comes to late coming, there is no provisions in law for late coming whatsoever. So you do not have any form of entitlement to being late for work. I want to say why. So when you took this job, Stephan, let's just use you as the example for Trinidad and Tobago today. Yeah. So we're gonna let Stephan be the guinea pig. So Stephan, when you took this job, you gave a commitment that you're going to be here 6 a.m. to 8 a.m.
Yeah.
Right? And, I mean, it means that, and there's a commitment by extension of this station to provide the viewers with a program that is available 6 a.m.
to 8 a.m. Yes.
Right? And some of your guests, sometimes they're late. I ain't gonna call no name.
Right, yeah.
We're gonna leave that right. Right? But it affects the show, right? That's what it does. It affects the show. And the reason why you want to have consistency in the show is so that people could have an expectation that is entrenched in dependability.
Okay.
In other words, they want to be able to depend on the fact that we're going to get up at 6 a.m. and Stephan is going to be there with this program to give us the critical information and have the discourse on the issues that are affected.
Yeah.
Right. Let's say that you're not there for 15 minutes. You don't get there until 15:15. It means now that the employer, the company, this show, has to find a solution to address the 15 minutes gap.
Correct.
Now, you were not here. Now, let's just imagine that you're working on this show for $100 per episode. That might be close to the figure, but all you do, we ain't going to talk about Stephan.
Right? Yeah, go ahead.
Right. Now, when you don't deliver the 2 hours, 120 minutes.
Right.
You're late by 15 minutes, whatever. You're thinking, but I do want my $100. Because that's what the average person is thinking. I don't want to lose. Right? But the employer has not gotten the 120 minutes. The show didn't get it. The customers didn't get what they expected. The viewers did not have the show available when it's supposed to be available. It's going to impact on the show. People are going to start to think now, well, maybe we can't really depend on this show. Maybe we need to watch another show.
Right.
That's going to not affect Stephan per se. It's going to affect the program.
The program, yeah.
Right. But Stephan still expects his $100. And that is why the provisions of law when it comes to wages is that it must be earned. You have to deliver your service, and then in exchange for that period that you've delivered your service, there is an agreement for what would constitute your remuneration package, your wages. If tomorrow morning they decide, Stefan, we're going to move the show to 6:15 and we're going to change your pay. You're not going to accept that. You're going to be mad. You're going to say, you need to give me an explanation for why you are deciding to change the terms of our arrangement. Would you agree?
Yes, agreed.
You're going to say, guys, if they're changing it or they can't touch my pay. You would also say that.
Yeah.
You have a problem.
Yeah, most
you would be
likely,
willing to give them less time, but your money must stay the
Your
same.
money must stay the same.
Right. The whole principle of it is that there's supposed to be fair and equitable exchange. And you notice I say fair and equitable. I didn't say fair and equal. Because in the concept of exchange of service for money, the truth is you can't quantify the value of life by attributing the value of a salary to that said value. In other words, if I were to ask you to sell me 1 hour of your life, outside of you having a job, that kind of thing, like sell me, I'm not going to literally, it's going to really happen, you're not going to want $100, you're not going to want $1,000, you want a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
So the value of time, when it comes to a person's availability or whatever, the fact is that it does transcend the salaries that we earn. It really does. But there's an understanding that I am going to deliver the service for this money because in whatever professional capacity, and Trinidad and Tobago, we are all professionals in our individual right, regardless of what labels or what stereotypes that people apply to different job functions. The fact is that we are all professionals in our individual right. As a professional, you're delivering a service and you have an agreement and an understanding for a specific wage, right? So the point about late coming is that it is in the same way that the employer does not have a right to get up tomorrow morning and pay you less for what you have agreed as at your service period or your time. In the same way, you can't get up tomorrow morning and decide you're going to give the employer less and then still have an expectation to get what the commitment was from the start.
Okay.
Right? So employers actually have a right to not pay employees for time lost as a result of late coming. They have that right because you did not deliver what you had committed yourself to delivering.
No.
Right?
Understood.
Now, when it comes to discretion, an employer also has a right to exercise discretion on whether or not they are going to adjust somebody's salary to reflect the lost time. So most employers have this practice of, Stefan, don't be late again now.
Right.
And maintain the salary. And people look at it as just a few minutes. But if you were to quantify in Trinidad and Tobago all the minutes lost, Stefan, we've done it in companies, not in Trinidad and Tobago, sorry, but in companies. When you quantify the minutes, they add up. And just think about, if I were to tell you, I'll take $1 from your pay every week. At the end of the year, it's going to be $52, right?
Yes.
If you are late 1 minute every day, 5 days, it's going to be 5 minutes, multiplied by 10, 50, multiplied by 5, 500, right? And then, so you see how it adds up, and then divide 500 by 60, and it tells you how many hours, right? My math is horrible, but I think that's what?
Maybe approximately there, yeah.
And then when you consider the impact that has on a business, it's very real. So this is where the reasonability is, Trinidad and Tobago. Being late from time to time is understood in industrial relations to be a causality of life. Because last week I didn't intend to be late. A lot of variables happened. Fender bumper, a little thing happened, a fender bender. Sorry, I said fender bumper.
Yeah.
Fender bender, and it back up the traffic in an area and whatever. These things happen, right? But what happens now is that as a person, like today, I left home 15 minutes earlier because I now know that I can't take the chance again of something like that happening.
Right,
but
that's going to throw you back, yeah.
Correct, and that's what employees, like people who use the excuse of traffic. Traffic is a part of life. And you have to have an idea of what the average time would be for you to get to work. And then you have to factor in the possibility that if there's an issue, a typical issue, what could be the worst case scenario? Now, employers are supposed to exercise a measure of discretion for infrequent occurrence. Right?
Infrequent occurrence.
Infrequent, yeah. Somebody, it will invariably run late It could, I should say, the possibility exists. And in industrial relations law, we have to give some type of consideration for that, right?
Okay, but to what extent? Because I could say I was caught in traffic,
Right,
but it might be because I get up late.
right,
When I come in work and I say, boss, that's real traffic.
correct.
And the boss know, well, okay, traffic is exactly as you said, is a part of your daily life. You're going to run into traffic. So, all right, I'll accommodate to that.
Correct.
But it don't mean that I run into traffic.
So this is where we never negatively interpret an employee's explanation. So we do that a lot in this country.
Never negatively
Yeah,
interpret.
never. You see,
All right.
this is what you do. So if you tell me that, whether or not I feel you're lying or whether you are lying becomes irrelevant. Here's the point. People just freak out. People are like, oh my, what is he talking about irrelevant? Listen, if Stefan is lying to me as the employer, you being the employee, Stefan, and you say it's traffic, my job is to say, okay, not a problem, Stefan. So, okay, Stefan, given that traffic has affected your ability to be on time tomorrow, my expectation is that you would make a plan now to accommodate that.
Right.
Because traffic could happen tomorrow again. So that simple conversation, you don't leave it in a vacuum. You don't say, all right, not a problem, and then you wait and it happen again. Yeah, but I feel Stefan lying, but
Right.
let me see what will happen again. Because now you negatively interpret the process and then you're playing the game of waiting to catch him. That's not how it works.
Okay.
Social dialogue is a critical part of the relationship. So it is my responsibility, it might even be a little bit fiduciary, meaning that it's intrinsic on me as the employer to give you that advice. Now let's just say you come again next week. Let's just say next week. Boss, I was late because traffic. Now the conversation clearly went over your head. And this is where I need to stop talking to you. I need to put the advice in writing. Dear
Okay,
Stefan,
so you've gone from verbal to written.
as per our previous conversation regarding the issue of traffic and its impact on your ability to be on time, the company is reminding you that you should give consideration for this issue of traffic, and therefore it is that you are advised that you should make the effort to leave home a few minutes earlier. I remember having this conversation. I wouldn't call anybody's name, of course. And the person, I will even say gender, the person, I said to the person, I said, what time? The person always late, just by 10 or 15 minutes, every single day. And instantly comes, everybody's freaking out. The manager said, get rid of her. They're freaking out. Everybody's freaking out. They're fed up. And I said to her, and I say, I shouldn't have said her, but maybe it's a him. You never know.
No, you never know.
And I said to the person, I said, what time do you leave home? And the person said, well, I leave 7 a.m. They're trying to get to work for 8 o'clock. I said, have you ever left home earlier? The person said, no. I said, here's a radical suggestion. Leave home 6:45. And the person said, what? 6:45? That's really early.
Yeah, 15 minutes, yeah.
This is my reaction. Yes, and you're going to be on time.
right.
But she was never late again.
Okay.
Do you know that what we take for granted, Trinidad and Tobago, as being an idea for a solution, quite often somebody else is not in their mind.
Not
That's
aware of it. They're not aware of it. Yeah.
And I know how that song.
I have no. I have seen that applied. That applies to many different things.
Yeah.
Where I have said this. There are some problems that, okay, just in general, like dealing with politics or whatever, right?
Right.
You may have a problem in your community, but the problem is not a complicated problem to solve, Somebody can just walk in the community and say, but wait now, why you don't do this? And you just never thought of it, but it's one of the simplest solutions that you will come across, right? But you just nobody thought of it now. For some reason, and that's the other thing too, because sometimes what is simple for me, right,
Could be
is
complicated.
not, it
could be complicated.
it's complicated for somebody else. But because it's simple for me, you would look at the other person and say, well, how you can't figure that out.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying? But common sense isn't so common, as the saying goes.
So it's a measure of awareness, and I will take this opportunity to point this out. I want to add this before we go off late coming. Pattern and frequency of late coming constitutes a violation of the employment terms. So where a person is frequently or consistently late. So I'll give you an example. If you're late once a week, then this week you were late once. That's not a pattern. But if you're late once every week for the next 4 weeks, that's a pattern.
There's a pattern.
Right? So by itself, anything by itself, when it comes to late coming, does not constitute a violation. But from the minute, if it's collatively, it shows a frequency, then it is a pattern. You know, some people are late all the time on a Monday, and all the other days they're on time. And then they try to use this explanation. They say, but I was early all the other days. So I always tell them, well, let me don't pay you this month. But all the other months I've paid you. Would we have an understanding? It doesn't work, right? And that's irrational. But I'm moving off of that, Stefan. What I will go to is this. Or some people have said to me that they want to try and get in the conversation. I think next week we'll do a full call-in segment. So social dialogue, it's critical for the employment relationship. People take it for granted, both employees and employers. What does social dialogue mean? It's, in simplicity, it's the environment where a conversation is had in regards to concerns, questions, or issues that are affecting the employment relationship. And it's supposed to be free from judgment. It's supposed to be free from an environment, or from a thinking, where anybody is establishing a position of absolution. In other words, I come to talk to you about late coming, and I've taken a position beforehand that you are late because you want to be late, and you know better, and you should not be late. And I'm not trying to understand your perspective. I don't have to agree. And that's the problem in Trinidad and Tobago. People argue all the time about what their understanding is, and then they take a position, Stefan, that the other party must agree. You ever notice that? You see it in Parliament all the time, right?
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing. We must now start to... Societies are a place where we are very conscientious, and we have a lot of information. We have access to it. And in that type of environment, it is easy for conflict to arise, because everybody now believes that they are right.
We always have this feeling that I right.
Right. What we must learn, what we must adopt, what we must practice as a cultural standard of progressive development is one where we take the time to express ourselves as genuinely as possible. And the simplicity of genuinity is this. Just say what you mean in the words that you are accustomed and you understand. Say that, and then allow the other person to respond, and allow the other person to share their views. And in listening to that, you're going to understand where you might be misrepresenting or not clarifying your position effectively. Now, alongside that, you will also get the opportunity to see where the other person's gap in understanding or their level of conscientiousness and awareness or their perspective lies. And that people practice some type of dialogue, but it's not very social. It's an anti-social dialogue.
Right.
Right? And this is where supervisory and managerial and directorships authorities get abused.
Okay.
Right?
I understand everything you're saying there with the late coming and the expectations and so on and so forth. And maybe I could tie it into something else. Not tie it into something else, but connect the whole mindset, right?
Right.
So when you're late, like I said, if you make an adjustment and you say, listen, we'll start 15 minutes late and we'll deduct X amount from your salary, right?
It's not deduction. It will be an adjustment. The reason why a deduction implies that the person has earned their money and you're taking it for some reason or penalty.
Right.
It's not that. It's an adjustment because you didn't earn it.
Right. So people don't expect, people expect to reach late and get the same money. Yes. Right. But yet, when they are to do overtime, right? So there's another part in the next half of the conversation.
I see where you're going with it.
Yeah, so when I have to work longer hours, I expect to be compensated, and not just by the base or the basic rate,
Right.
but by an extra rate because you have to pay me for my time,
Right.
right? That extra time that you want me to work.
Absolutely. So,
Right.
and I know the contention in the
So
country
there's from the employee standpoint, there is a standard that needs to be upheld.
Right.
When I have to work longer hours.
Right.
But from the employee standpoint, well, if I reach 15 later, no big deal.
I like this. I'll tell you why.
So,
People always, some people in Trinidad and Tobago, first off, they envelop this. What is the right word for this practice? It's a very contentious practice,
right,
where I come late and I work back.
right,
You ever hear about that? You're
Come
late
late
15
and work
minutes,
back.
so I'm going to work 15 minutes later.
right, yeah, I'll do an extra 15.
Worst
To
form
make up the time.
worst form of practice when it comes to addressing late coming, because it
Okay.
leaves room for both parties to exploit that type of arrangement. I'll tell you why. So if I know that I could work back my time, then I have the ability, I have the option now to come to work when I want. And invariably, the employer now has established a standard that changes the understanding of when the work hours start and when they end.
Right.
Because if we have that understanding, then I could show up for 10 o'clock. And then the employer will freak out and say, well, I did not intend for you to just decide that you could come when you want. But the truth is, you did create that proverbial monster because you gave the employee a blank check when it comes to what start time they should have. You never mix in overtime or additional hours worked with that type late coming.
With late coming.
Never, because it's a horrible practice. Now, somebody might be thinking, well, what about compensatory time off? There's a big difference. You see, if I call my employer and I say, listen, I have an issue and I need to be in 2 hours late, right? And there's an understanding, the employer says, here's what, not a problem, but in the interest of avoiding you having to lose 2 hours of pay, we will have an arrangement that you're going to work 2 hours on this day to make up. Those are one-off circumstances. That should never become a precedence in your company, ever. Now, let's talk now about additional hours or overtime. You notice I'm deliberately using two different terms?
Yes.
Right. That is because when you consider the provisions of law, overtime is covered under the Minimum Wage Act. But overtime is not an entitlement to anybody who's outside of the minimum range that is established in the Minimum Wage Act. A lot of people don't know that. It's not an entitlement. So in other words, Stefan, if I'm paying you and you're out, your salary bracket takes you outside of the minimum wage provisions, you and I can have an established understanding, established policy that your overtime calculation is going to be, or additional hours worked. It's not going to be overtime anymore. It's going to be additional hours worked. It's going to be paid at your existing rate.
Okay.
Now let me be clear about this. If companies have established policies that give this premium rate for persons, even though they're outside of the minimum range, which is $20.50 to $30.75. Outside at $30.75.
Right.
The Minimum Wage Act doesn't apply to you. The law is written like that. The Minimum Wage Act is applicable to persons who earn minimum wage or up to 1.5 times the minimum wage.
1.5 times.
Which is half of $20.50 is $10.25. That puts you at $30.75. So
right.
What happens is, now if companies have established already policies for overtime for those people, even though they're outside of it, those policies now take precedence.
Right.
But if a lot of companies, the standard practice is you're outside of the minimum range, we are paying you a premium salary already. Once you work additional hours, you're going to continue to earn. You'll get paid for your hours worked. And then some companies, lateral with that, they have an alternative. Or you will get compensatory time off. Compensatory time off, of course, is time back. So if you work 4 hours overtime, you'll have a 4-hour period that you can take for personal use or otherwise, and it's normally arranged. So that's the dynamic, and that's the wonderful thing, Stefan, about how you manage terms.
Right.
It doesn't have to be rigid, right? At the end of the day, it just has to be in an environment where parties have mutual respect for the rights of each other.
So just to be clear, if I'm getting $150 an hour, right, and I work in accordance with the Act, and I work 3 hours overtime, I'm going to get paid, well, it will be additional time, right? And I'm going to get paid at $150 per hour, the same rate.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be in accordance with the Act because you're outside of the provisions.
Right, we're outside of the provisions, right? But I am not entitled to get more than that.
I'm entitled to be paid. So make no mistake about it. There is no provisions in law, and it's not written, but it's understood, industrial relations, and it's as a matter of fact, it's ingrained in our constitution and in the provisions of general industrial relations practices that a person cannot work for free. That's slavery, right?
Yeah, of course.
That has been abolished since 1838, right?
Right.
So a person works and they must be paid.
No.
Now let's talk about the real contention. The contention of whether or not the person has in fact worked overtime or additional hours. That's the real contention, right?
Whether or not the person
has in fact worked
overtime
or the
additional hours.
Whichever way it goes. And
okay, but how do you get a whether or not?
You don't know why?
Why?
Well, look, Trinidad and Tobago, I'm informing step one.
Right.
There's a huge contention in the public sector right now, where the minister would have had made an announcement. Oh no, sorry, not the minister. I apologize. Not a minister. One of the leaders of one of the RHAs raised an issue about the or concern about the overtime calculation or the question of whether overtime
I know what you're
is
talking about.
legitimate.
I see the pool nurses.
Correct. Now,
right.
I've heard and I've seen a lot of comments. You've seen the comments. Right?
Yeah,
People as a matter of fact, the public is saying if the people work, they need to be paid.
Right.
And I absolutely agree with that statement as it stands.
Yes.
If a person works, then they must be paid because we don't have slavery in this country and anywhere in the world as far as we are, well, not in this country, but I mean, that in the world is a whole different conversation. The point though is that where is the onus? Who has the responsibility of accounting for legitimate hours? I'll tell you, it's the employer. So the truth is, if people were paid for hours that they worked, and there is a question mark over that money paid, that's not the employee's problem. That is an employer's problem. And time and time again, we've seen situations arising where employers end up with a negative outcome, and instead of introspectively looking at their systems and their processes and their practice, they now want to blame and penalize the employee.
Right.
And that is where we have issues in this country. Remember, as a business owner or as an employer, whether you're state or private, the onus is on you to have the right systems and the right structure and the right practices that would govern the process management of your resources. And that includes your finance and your people. And Stefan, I am almost very certain that those state institutions depend on a sign-in, physically sign-out system. I feel very confident about that.
Right.
Because if I come to work and I sign, let's say I'm late, but I write 8 o'clock, whose fault is that? You know, somebody will tell me, they'll say, but the employee should not lie. Should not lie?
We have a minute left, eh?
Yeah, we're gonna close there. We're gonna close there because we will talk about this next week.
All right, no problem.
The ethics of the expectation of ethics behind the work environment and this relation. We'll talk about that next week. Whether they should or should not lie becomes irrelevant. If you allow your system to give them the opportunity to lie and get away, that's your fault.
That is your fault. All right, so I'll tell you what, people. That's we gotta wrap it up here with Mr. Narinesingh, but very interesting. Exactly where we left off here. I was looking at that article, that story with the pool nurses, because I saw that the chairman, Dr. Gopi Singh, said that they were able to bring the bill down from 40 million to 4 million, which is a huge decrease in overtime pay.
And I guarantee you,
from 40 to 4.
I guarantee you, all that they did was put structures in place.
And that's
all that they did.
Yeah, that's probably restructured the way.
Correct.
So we had anyway. We will get back to that next week. But I want to thank Mr. Narinesingh for joining us this morning and sharing his insight on late coming, and of course a little thing on overtime. And we will continue discussion next week, and we will accommodate calls and comments as well next week when we do so. So we got to take a break. When we come back from the break, people, we have Twiggy, Calypsonian Twiggy's here with us, and she has a show coming up on Sunday at Napa. We're going to talk about that for a little bit before we get to the birthdays and everything else to wrap up the show. So don't go anywhere. Breaking On continues after this.